Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where we talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the series premiere of The Recruit. A great series premiere. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So first and foremost, it'd been a while since I saw the trailer, so I wasn't really sure what to fully expect once again going into the show, but I did not realize it's like, oh man, it's my first week on the job. In fact, the opening showcase is like, I'm a big fan of stories being like, oh yeah, this thing, you're starting in the middle of things, and then like, oh, let's rewind to kind of show where all this started. Yeah, his life basically goes super pear-shaped in like 2 weeks. I'm like, oh, that's gotta suck. When we like flash back, it's like, oh, this is only like my second day on the job, and basically he's meant to mediate issues between two people, because it's like, hey, this guy wants to read this document it was like a senator wants to read a document in front of the Senate or whatever. Maybe he wasn't even a senator. I don't know. Like, either way, it's like, yeah, I want to read this document. So Owen has to be like, no, you can't. And he even says, like, yeah, you go ahead and do all that, but there's going to be some legal ramifications for you. So cool, go right ahead and do that. So then he also gets put in this position where two of his co-workers, one is played by Colton Dunn. The other, I was wondering why I recognized that actress. Her name's Artie Mann. I was like, why do I recognize her? She was in Big Bang Theory. She's Kuthra Patri's, Raj's, I don't remember. It's been a while since I've seen any Big Bang Theory. Was it Raj's sister? I was like, oh, that's what I recognize her from. Also, she was in a single episode of Leverage. And the reason why that kind of stuck in my head too is because I rewatched the entirety of Leverage, 2021, like before Leverage Redemption started. So she's in like an episode in the final season. So I think that's also why it was even clear, like why she seemed even more recognizable. It's like, it's funny recognizing her from something she did. Like, I mean, I guess arguably the same thing. It was because like her and Big Bang Theory was like a while back too. Anyway, intentions and all that aside, those two characters suck. They like dropped everything on him because he's the newbie at the job, and they gave him gray mail. See, that's what I think is so fascinating about this show. Like, because most spy thriller stuff, it's like you working for the CIA. Yeah, you get some of like the tech people or something, but you never get like you get. It's some of the team, the squad that kind of helps out stuff like on the, more domestic front or whatever. Like, it's usually the spies get all, they're the ones that get all the attention because it's cool, it's sexy, it's spy thrillery. It's like rarely do you ever get like the grunt work of it. And so seeing it from the perspective of the CIA's lawyer, a lawyer working for the CIA, which you never really think about. I mean, maybe it's come up before, but like I said, it's always just, it's never been like the focus of a story. So him getting the grunt work of, oh, you gotta look through these gray mailers. Basically, people who claim to have leverage against the CIA that they're willing to expose for whatever reason. I think this guy someone in the letter was like, yeah, my girlfriend dumped me, so I'm going to expose some of the stuff from the CIA. So it's like, how many of these people are just making random crazy threats, and how many of them are valid? And so he ends up coming across a name, Max, and he ends up running down it because like there's certain terminology because he's still fresh-faced in the job. So it's like, hey, what does this name mean? It's like, well, that's a code name no one outside of the agency should be able to know. But also this person, Max, doesn't have a file, but she could be so high profile that like, and so like up there that they kind of wouldn't have an actual assault file on her. So ended up having to track down, he brought this to his boss. His boss ended up ripping the other two apart, who gave all this gray mail to Owen in the first place, because they were passing off their grunt work to him. But I was like, oh, he ended up finding something in the grunt work, even though it was your grunt work beforehand. And Colton Dunn's character was like, no, yeah, it might have been I might have looked through it and stuff like that, but it was actually hers before me. Like, does anyone actually ever find anything in gray mails? And she's like, yeah, a few times. So I guess it's like, it happens, but it's super rare. So, and he wants to find, because he's trying to find Max's handler to kind of confirm whether or not any of this is true. It's like, well, there was someone she worked in an operation with in Belarus, and that person is in Yemen, which is the whole spy thing of like, wait, you never put someone and their pseudonym, an agent in their pseudonym, like code name or whatever, in this on the same note, because his boss immediately grabbed it, burned it, and it's like, oh, I need you to. He's also like, get rid of that. So like, he has to dump out the ashes of it and kind of scoops it out, and like, once again, like, this show is one of those like action-y comedies, so I think it's so once again, kind of seeing. I do label this kind of almost like, yeah, the non-sexy aspects of, I mean, it's kind of some of the more traditional aspects of like gathering information, going to see someone about certain information. There's that, but it's none of the like actiony, sexy stuff of like, your more spy thrillery, like CIA type of thing. So once again, it's just, I think it will eventually lead to that, but it's not going to be from the typical, like, oh, Jason Bourne or Jack Ryan perspective on things. I think it's coming from dude, I'm just a lawyer. I took this job because it was exciting. He went to Yemen because he let his fellow coworkers tell him like, hey, you should do this, blah, 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 blah. And he went unprepared and he got tortured for it. They beat him up. They ripped his suit. They put out a fingernail because it's like, yeah, like your coworkers, they should have told you like, hey, if your passport was black, you would have just got sent back. But because it's not, that means you don't have immunity here, so we can kind of do whatever we want to you. And I was like even saying like, yeah, the police here could grab you up and just shoot you in the back of the head and no repercussions. At the very least, if you had immunity, they'd have no choice, but because that kind of puts you in a position where like, all right, we can't just like kind of kill you. And it's like, dude, he got the rough end of the deal. And he even admits like, hey, my dad got blown up in Afghanistan, and like his mom kind of never quite got over it, and him like doesn't want to get lost in his thoughts, or like have to be stuck with his thoughts. Kind of goes like he tries to keep moving all the time, because like the moment I stop, it's when like my thoughts kind of catch up to me. And when the guy's like freeing him, and he kind of just stares at him, Owen's like, yes, I pissed myself. You guys, congratulations, you guys are really good at your job. So I love that they gave him a random shirt, bandaged his finger up a little bit, sent him on his way, and the moment he came back, I was like, cool, guys, it was basically like you got me. That's so awesome, guys. Everyone's telling him time and time again about like how this job works, that it's a game, and you got to learn how to play the game. That basically never trust anyone, because everyone here is looking for an opportunity to screw each other over. Like no one has each other's back. It's just kind of like it's a kill or be killed, do whatever you got to do to survive type of situation. Especially he could get some of those interactions with them, but also with the actor who played Donnie in Orphan Black. I love that he's just like, yeah, I gotta stay awake, because his job is to make sure that these very specific operatives don't go through the operation that they want to, as like he's kind of like in between, trying to stop them from doing what they want to do. And then later on he wakes up, he's like, what the hell happened? And he looks, it's like, oh, they drugged me so they could get their operation going. You're like, Jesus. It's like, that's super effed up. And he's like, well, all I can do is try to mitigate it as much as possible. I'm like, wow, that's wild. Well, because we know that he was, pumping all that coffee. He was asking, is like, oh, do you have like any speed? And it's like, I have a roommate who has Adderall. I was like, all right, Adderall will do. He's like, jeez, bro. I mean, at that point, home dude he's like, I've been in this office for like three days straight. And it's like, well, Owen kind of gets to himself, because it's like, he doesn't have a time to stop. It's like, oh, he was on a plane to Yemen. He was immediately off the plane. Then he was like back to the U.S. He ended up meeting, Max, and she comes off very like the very moment you meet Max and talk to her, and the way she kind of like immediately once again points out how much of an amateur Owen is. It's like, yeah, you gave out too much information. Later on, it's like, cool, you shouldn't have never told me your name, because I was able to find. It's like, yeah, you probably don't want to work with the CIA and have a social media presence like that. Like, so, because she's like, yeah, I know everything about you. I know where you've ever lived. I know every person you've ever dated. So later on in the episodes, he's deleting photos from his Instagram, specifically the ones about other people, which is his roommate Terrence and his ex Hannah, which that's a whole thing we'll get to in a second. But yeah, it's like once again, it's one of those things you don't really think about, but it's also like people should have probably prepped you for it. To be fair, it is like your first week. Like he jumped at the recruitment offer just because like the thrill of it. He loves it, he does love that situation, but it's not quite. It's kind of like he's a thrill seeker, but it's not quite the situation that he thought it would be. Once again, I think it's like he's coming at it from the perspective of like, oh yeah, CIA, like that's so clandestine, that's sexy, and it's like, it's not the sexy work you thought it was going to be. In fact, it sucks. Oh, it majorly sucks. I think that's such an interesting situation. But Max is like, hey, I have files on the CIA. You want them? They're in this storage. Wait, you have CIA classified files in like a storage unit? She's like, yeah, I like to live dangerously. He went there, people rolled up on him, and it's like, cool, they got the guns. It's like, bullets can go through metal. He's like, yeah, I know. I was like, did you actually know that? Or are you just saying that because you're like, I don't want to seem like I'm already in a position where I'm supposed to I'm about to get killed. I also love that he was like, right, call like the FBI to kind of back you up. And he's on the phone, and they're like, oh, press 1 for this particular thing with the FBI, 2, 3. I'm like, is that a real thing? You would think as someone with some working with the CIA, you'd be able to kind of get like, but I guess because you're a newbie, you don't have, I guess the whole thing is like maybe you go through the problem. Maybe that's the problem. Once again, the unsexy proper channels of how you get like an FBI, like, but maybe it's like you're so lower in the totem pole that it's like you'd have to go to someone higher up to kind of grease the wheels to make that happen faster. So he went by himself, which was a stupid thing to do. When you're told to kind of bring the FBI with you to handle something like that, it means you kind of need a unit in case stuff like that does happen. The guys, I thought at some point in time he would have switched out the bag or something. Good thing he didn't, because the moment those guys opened the bags, it was acid in there. So I guess I was like, you would think that would ruin the money, but I guess it's like, maybe it's in a position where it'll spray out but not like fall back any. Maybe any that falls back on the money isn't that big of a deal. So it's like, cool. Shows what kind of precautions she's willing to take. But I found it so fascinating too. And I think this is where we kind of get into there being a larger picture here. There's got to be more to this. There's some like hush, like semantics, not even semantics, like some hush stuff going on. The fact is, Max is being arrested. Like, she got arrested for murder. Apparently, she murdered, like, what was it, like a truck driver? But people are saying that maybe that truck driver was connected to like running drugs for her or something. So I'm like, is she like super deep undercover type of situation? Is that what the revelation of this is going to be? That this was all like, he's part of like some deep undercover operation that she's kind of running, and or is she just like, she's playing some kind of game of her own? And I think it's one of those things where, at least from Owen's perspective, he's not going to find out what she's really up to until like that final like twist, because I'm sure there's going to be so many wild twists and turns when it comes to this whole situation, but it probably won't be until the very end that he'll be like, wait, this is what's going on. But so once again, she knows all there is to kind of know about Owen, and Owen knows nothing really about her. Especially because he came into this at a disadvantage because she's a trained like, she knows what she's doing. He's a newbie in all of this, so he kind of said more than he should have. He thought he was more so in control, and she's the one that kind of took control of it. And even when he took control, you always kind of second guess stuff like that. When he seemed like he got her on her back foot, he's like, yeah, this is where I kind of thrive, so I don't think you have as much leverage as you think. Like, the fact is, she's like, right, you need me and I need you. He's like, you're a murderer. Like, why would I really need your help, or why would I help you out? The moment she said, once he kind of like, quote unquote, like I said, put her on her back foot, it's one of those things where I'm like, this seemed like some 4D chess type of shit, where it's like, she's actually manipulating you. She wants you to think like, oh, you got her, like, oh, caught her off balance. It's like, nah, man. You thought you caught me. Oh, I'm on one foot, but I'm balancing perfectly on this one foot. But you think I'm dangling and I'm not. I want you to think I am, but it's like, oh, my balance is perfect. I'm drawing you in by making you think you got me on my, you caught me like, slipping essentially. I don't know. That's the feel I got from that conversation. maybe she legitimately did get caught off guard by him saying all that. He's like, yeah, you have, like, what I could tell by you is you kind of have no one. You have no friends, you have no wife, you have no joy in your life, you know? Which it did seem like it struck a chord with her. I mean, because maybe it legitimately did. But she's like, hey, my boss is, my handler was not Bob. It's like, okay, cool. He ends up going to the actor who plays Donnie, like, played Donnie in Orphan Black, went to him and like, hey, what was his name? It's like, who is not Bob? Not only is not Bob some like legendary CIA operative, the reason why is not Bob because this person refused to use like a code name that had Bob or Robert. So I'm like, okay. And now that person is the Secretary of the State. So yeah, he's like, I am not about to get caught up in the clusterfuck that you're mixed up in, because I got my own operations and stuff I'm supposed to be dealing with. So he doesn't tell his boss what's what. He's just like, hey, I'm just going to keep investigating. Like, that does seem like it warrants it. So he ends up calling up Max and he's like, hey, should I trust you? And she's like, when our interests align, yes. Otherwise, no. So he's like, okay, I'll take you up on it, which she was excited about. So there's also like him getting subpoenaed. Like Violet left him one. Artie Mann's character, Violet, left him on his desk. So you're like, okay. So there's just a lot. It's like, it's slow paced, but also at the same time, it's like, okay, we're starting off a little, it's fastball. The fastball came super fast, at least from my perspective, when it came to this episode. But like I said, there's the whole situation with like his roommates, Terrence and Hannah. They all live together, but it seems like Hannah's his ex, because she's like, oh yeah, I talked to your mom. She still was under the impression we're dating. He's like, well, I haven't talked to her in 6 months. She doesn't even know I'm working in the CIA. So I guess there's some, as he was kind of talking about with the whole Yemen thing, because she works for like a law firm. I forgot what he said about Terrence. Terrence has a pretty like high position job too, or something like that. So the fact is that you're all roommates, and I'm sure that's all going to become like a focal point in this story. It's going to be relevant in some regards. So we'll have to wait and see where all that ends up taking us. But I'm very excited to see where the next episode ends up taking us going forward with all of this. What Max is going to have Owen mixed up in, and how far down the rabbit hole he's going to go. Based on just like from what I remember from the trailer, it seems pretty far. But we'll see what ultimately ends up happening. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.